Jeff, we're going to go into some Q&A, but since you're sort of present on the virtual stage, so to speak, we may start with you if that's okay.
Sure.
So a quick one from me, and then I'll open up the lines. So Jerry Cottage put a question to me, and he says, if you're factoring a patient's beliefs and values into a decision, really, and they believe in heaven, should you let them die? Should you kill them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. So I think the answer that any doctor would give you is no. The extent to which the medical ethicist can accommodate that answer is unclear. Because, I mean, there's a phenomenon in AI called overfitting, which is where you have a sort of limited set of data points and you make a model that fits those perfectly, but it doesn't generalize very well. The medical ethicist community has basically taken this issue of paternalism and created a very, very overfitted model of what morality requires in healthcare, such that absolutely everything is geared towards the satisfaction of the preferences of the patient. And it is not so clear that they have a plausible story about these weird cases in which, patients have very strange or irrational beliefs and want something that there's good reason not to. So at the moment, it's just kind of ad hoc adjustments to fit that in. I agree it's a defect with the current orthodoxy in medical ethics.
What wonderful answer. There's lots of questions coming in. This is our time. It's your time. We've got 23 minutes. I'll remind you that Daniel's still around, Irene's still around, Hina's still around, so really jump in. So let's make sure we hear from them as well. But so let's just thank Jeff, I guess, on the chat. Let's not forget to do that and just show appreciation. I'm sure Jeff's got many constraints on his time, so we're very grateful that you would spend a bit of time with us. Very, very enjoyable talk. Yeah, the floor is open. So switch your camera, your mic on. One thing we do have, we have the dudes definitely speak up more at MKAI. We are very accustomed to men asking questions. So let's make sure we make room for everybody as well in these sessions. But jump in. Who's got questions?
Okay, Jeff Tulsi here again. It's really impressive your presentation, mate. So just I'm really glad that you showed the same scenario. I'm also from the Oxford AI research fellow. So my question to you is, some of the most promising and impactful applications of the AI are in the healthcare. This is the most debatable. I'm not here to debate with you anyway. So from helping doctors more accurately diagnose a disease and providing more individual patient treatment, all those things. So, however, there are also ways of which AI could then the right healthcare. For example, if I put you the right scenario, one of the business use case, I work with one of the latest NHS AI labs scenario, for example. So an AI system could be designed to recommend different treatment depending on the insurance status of the patients or how much they are able to pay, or potentially any kind of a life-saving care to some because of their socioeconomic status or harming marginalized group or who already suffered from the insufficient access to quality healthcare. So my point is, or my clarification or my discussion in this forum is how this machine learning based system may learn that such diagnostic or nearly always fatal and recommended the doctors not treated, or even if in this case treatment may be effective, how effective the treatment could be based on the machine learning models.
Cool. So just to double check I understood your question, I'll sort of repeat back what I got from that, and then we can check if that's right. So is the claim that with, say, treatment recommender algorithms, there is variance across, like, say, socioeconomic status groups in terms of like how predictively accurate they are, or what kind of recommendations they're giving for treatments, and how can we sort of fend off that ethical problem? Is that the question?
Yes, it's sort of, forgive me for my lengthy conversation and the question. So yes, it comes to the ethical and all the biasing and everything. So how fair the system, the medical system, in terms of this is like basically we are talking about the what kind of accountability is there for a life and death medical decision made by a machine versus a doctor. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, so I guess there's sort of two different issues there. One is the question of accountability and how it's the case that when the machine learning algorithm is involved in the clinical decision, how it is that you make sure that everything's kind of upfront and explicit such that decisions can be challenged if people have been, say, unfairly treated. And then the other question is a kind of empirical question of, given the current technologies, is it in fact the case that there's sort of biases across different, say, socioeconomic groups or races or genders and so on? I don't know the answer to the empirical question. That the technology is very new and it's not been rolled out at scale yet. In terms of the accountability question, I think there's a kind of onus on developers and government and policymakers and ethicists to keep shouting about this and to make sure that these systems are as transparent and as fair as possible. In particular, just so that people can flag concerns as and when they arise. It's very difficult to challenge things if the systems aren't explicit about what's going on. So yeah, I share your concern very much, but I'm sorry I couldn't sort of give a better answer to that. I think it's still up in the air what the relevant regulatory actions are going to be and what the current state of the technology is.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Thanks, Jeff. So, and this gives me based on, and also again, this raises a large question again for me now based on the answer discussion regarding the extending to which certain things.
Oh, so you're going to use all my time up.
Sorry, apologize.
Look, have a chat with Jeff or something, or connect with him because we could have no other time for questions.
Because this is really interesting topic, what we are facing across how AI is helping the COVID situation. Yeah, so this is really.
It's fascinating, Tulsi. I totally agree. But
yeah. Sorry, I'll wrap up quickly in just off minute quickly. So this raises larger question for me, basically regarding the extent to the which certain things should be automated and how and when to require a human versus loop into the doctor. So I just want to understand how much responsibility should be held by human doctors versus the AI system for making recommendations. Do you have any ideas based on your thesis? Jeff?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very, very tricky question. And I think it depends in part on the capabilities of the technology, because essentially what you're trading off potentially is, diagnostic accuracy and accuracy in terms of like treatment recommendations against, having these greater accountability mechanisms in place by putting a human in the loop. I think if it's the case that, you're genuinely losing a lot of statistical lives per year because you're refusing to use that technology, then, I would be willing to kind of budge somewhat on accountability. But, it's a very difficult trade-off and it's not clear how to draw that line at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Richard. Sorry.
Not at all. Thank you, Tulsi.
Please. I'm going to be very quick now with my question. If I may.
Then we'll hear from Morris.
I've got a question for Jeff, Daniel, and Hina, if she's still on there. And the two-part question. First part is, we've heard an awful lot about the benefits of AI. I'd be particularly keen on your top 3 risks of AI, and connected to that, with regards to those risks, what do you think needs to be done from both a regulatory and governance perspective to manage those in a way that long-term survival of humanity is being guaranteed further down the line? Thank you.
So Marcus has taken us up to midnight now. So first of all, thank you for that. Morris, did you want to just say something about that last piece? Because I feel like we're going to miss your moment.
That's a really good question. But just going back to Jeff for a minute, there's a systemic problem there, which is there are medical accuracies, and at the same time as being medical accuracies, there are also subjective models. And it is, the doctor's thought process, the patient's thought process, these are all subjective models. And we dismiss the idea of subjective models, even though we can build them in AI. We don't, because we come from a world that was designed by process thinking and mathematics. So I find your thesis to be correct, sir. but I would suggest that if you wanted to go to another step, you would look at the fact that empirical diagnosis messes around with what are fundamentally subjective models, and that you could add those subjective models to your to the next stage, because everyone's idea of perfect and okay is built on a subjective model.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah,
No,
and
I think
I'd love to discuss it with you guys. Thank you so much for your patience, Richard. I'll
Morris,
shut up now.
Thank you. No, not at all. Thank you for putting that in. Unfortunately, we have to run against the clock. And one thing we do always try and do is finish on time, out of respect to everybody, of course. Jeff, I'll let you just catch your breath for a second. So Marcus, big question. Hina's going to drop off in 4 minutes. So why don't we hear from you first? You can talk about Marcus's question, or Ellen's saying, did you want to talk about, tell us about AI for her for a few minutes as well?
Of course. And let me actually just drop in a LinkedIn group chat. So essentially what we do is, I think like Ellen, and like you just said, I think there are not enough women in AI. And I think the most beautiful piece about it is we're all learning and growing together. So I've actually, there's a women in AI and machine learning community that you can get on. So there's a LinkedIn group that I just pasted in our chat that you are invited to be a part of. And more than that, we do like learning, think of it as learning parties every week, every bi-weekly actually. So we come up with a list of topics. So we've actually spoken about risks of using AI. We've spoken about ethical considerations. So anything and everything that you're interested in, that's what defines the agenda. So we all learn things together. So shameless plug there, but I've dropped the link in the chat. And just coming to the question as well, though, I would say that the biggest risk, at least from my perspective, and I know all of us will have a different perspective here based on the industry that we're in, but since I am working in the industrial sector, I would say that the biggest thing I see is making sure that reskilling is a part of change management programs, because it's really all about transferring skills. I think I have seen field technicians that have adopted my AI and they love it. They are so empowered by it. The people who adopt it are such change agents for us so far. So it's about how can we make every person a change agent for AI? Because when we use AI today in our lives through in our apps, like I love it when YouTube or Spotify recommend a song that I like, right? Or Amazon. So we love AI in our lives. It's about taking that same sentiment and putting that in the industrial application. So I think that would be one around adoption. And I will say, I think the tricky piece is also, by the way, like a lot of folks in the industry are talking about, should there be legal considerations around knowing when you're talking to an AI or when you're not talking to an AI? Like if you use Twitter changes your newsfeed, or any social media for that matter, right? Should you have the control to choose whether you want to see the latest tweets first, or if you want to see what their AI models think you would like to see? So giving you as a user that control is a big piece that I think is worth talking about for hours and hours.
I don't know how we try and compress this subject matter into a couple of hours, but we try. But we are back, of course, next month. I guess you've got to go, so thank you again.
Thank you, and would love to connect with anyone offline. Let me know if you'll have questions. But thank you for having me today. Thank you, Richard, for inviting me. Again, great questions. Love the engagement here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've got Marcus's question on the go. We haven't heard from Daniel for some time, and we haven't heard from Irene. Are you both still there?
I'm here. If you want to go.
I'm here.
You go first.
No, please go first.
Well, I think I've already listed 6 of the big concerns I have about AI. I've used Pestle, which of course is not a complete framework, to articulate some of those risks and many of the different things that are going around the press and the top of our minds with regards to some of these risks. And I think it's an okay framework to start with. So I think I've already articulated 6, but I think the main risk is I see a massive misunderstanding still about what these technologies are. And I also see a huge amount of misinvestment. And I am worried that organizations that don't understand and engage with genuine experts will find themselves investing in technologies that are not going to drive value. And I think eventually the hype will subdued, and the real AI stuff will come. But I would just caution people, and I guess the analogy that I forgive me for insulting anybody on the call here, but if for some reason physicists or people that had physics backgrounds were somehow really valuable now in industry. If I'd dabbled in a bit of physics, or if I'd done a bit of analytics during my degree, I would be very hesitant to call myself a physicist. But we've got every person and their dog calling themselves an AI expert. And I actually think there's a very small handful of people that really genuinely understand about the ethics and building safe, genuine AI systems. And I would encourage people to engage with those people.
Although it does remind me that Elon Musk dabbles in a bit of brain surgery now, doesn't he?
Indeed.
Irene, do you want to weigh in on that, or should we get another question?
Well, if there's no question, well, I just a disclaimer. Like I said before, I'm just a girl trying to solve her mother's issue, right? So no AI expert. But what will be interesting to see, and I'll just put a different twist to the conversation, what will be really interesting to see, and what we're trying to explore at ECOBA and also with some of our other tech work is, how to bring so much value to our users, and again, this word users, we may need to find a different representation of it, but how can we bring so much value to the people who are using our technology, and so they become part and parcel of the benefits, of that platform. Or so for example, on ECOBA, right? So we're talking about a fintech platform where people can save and lend to each other and showcase products and but when we start bringing in the third parties, whether it's people to bring in extra financing, or to bring in value addition in insurances, or to use the platform for other things, whether it's advertising or whatever, how do we make sure that value, that whatever value that we bring on board also is shared with the person that is interacting with that platform, so we all benefit? That will be a very interesting way of using technology and move away from this notion where here's a tech platform, yes, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, but I can do so much more other things, and you don't have a lot of choice. So again, how do we make sure that it's choice driven? I am choosing to do this because I know when I do this, I'm rewarded or I'm incentivized, so we all win. That's it, Richard.
Wonderful, interesting, and of course a vital perspective as well, I would add. 6 minutes on the clock. Karen Silverman asked a question a little bit earlier. I don't know if Karen's still on the Zoom call.
I am.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind, Karen?
So my question was really to Jeff, because I think we deal with a lot of this in both the healthcare and the commercial context, which is this sort of known chasm between humans' declared preferences and their revealed preferences. And so how we sort of start to fold that into some of the constructs that you were describing around consents and informed consent and autonomous decision making. So I know that's an enormous topic. I'm just
Does everyone just get at the biggest questions they can think of for the last 5 minutes?
Its own thing. But anyway, I really just wanted to hear, just sort of in the time you have, just to understand how where you're tugging on that thread. And now, thank you.
No, thank you. So is the thought that usually there's a difference between people's like reveal preferences and people's sort of ideal preferences that they'd have after a period of deliberation? And how is it that we sort of access the ideal preferences for the purposes of medical decision making when they could be quite hard to access in practice? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean that and the fact that there's that sort of cognitive problem and moral problem, but there's also the just language and expression problem. People aren't all equally capable of expressing either one.
Yeah. So I think this is an ongoing project that medical ethicists are trying to deal with, and they do that via a variety of techniques. So one is to, rather than just kind of expect the patient to come forward with, completely coherent preferences, that they actually kind of talk the patient through what the relevant considerations might be. So they might sort of point things out to the patient that they might take to matter, and kind of, rather than just sort of assuming that the patient knows what they want, actually kind of guide them through that deliberation. I mean, I won't say that that's perfect, and I think there are systemic failings in the healthcare system to do that properly. But at the very least, I think the ideal has been articulated, and the problem is more of a kind of healthcare governance one of what the doctors have best reason to do to implement that ideal.
I mean, for what it's worth, I think it's actually an area where technology could probably help guide clinicians in doing a better job than they currently do.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be a place for prompting.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And for all the medical ethicists are worried about, say, treatment recommendation algorithms, I do think there's scope to actually improve the kind of deliberation we have by prompting clinicians to think about these things, using the algorithms themselves.
Thank you so much.